Families of Suburbia by Alison Miller of Panania 2213. Narrated by Janine Penfold. Sitting at the airport, I remember my nan going by air to New Zealand. It was around 1964 and I was 7. I had never known anyone to fly or cruise anywhere. Our holidays consisted of rented houses at Taree, Manila, the Entrance, and then our holiday of all holidays at the Florida Motel on the Gold Coast, Queensland. Built on a canal and with a car-hotel, where your car was parked right beside your unit. But Nan was going overseas. I asked Dad recently, how come Nan went overseas? Was there a particular reason? Yes, she probably got your granddad's insurance and I got shares in his bankrupt factory, he sighed. On her return, she bought my sister Linda a brown-haired, brown-eyed doll she called Leet. She was the most unusual toy I'd ever seen. I got her very Caucasian, blonde-haired, blue-eyed twin, Marie. Living in suburban Revesby, we personally knew no Asian or Islander people, nor had we ever seen any. I knew the Jar Jars and Hannahs were from Malta and Lebanon, the most foreign, outlandish places I could imagine. They spoke in broken English and were very devout Catholics. The only foreigners I remember were White Russians, Latvians, Lithuanians and Polish. In post-war Revesby suburbia, they blended in. In fact, their super blonde hair made them memorable. They came from somewhere undefined to me on a map, with parentage that was both fascinating and confusing. My friend Lois's father, an Italian market gardener, brought sheaths of gladioli to the nuns at school for the year's end. In faltering English, he surprised us by coming to our classroom in his work overalls in a time when parents never approached the school directly. The March family had 13 children, including 8 girls, all immaculately dressed with beautiful, curly brown, waist-length hair. Their house, to my astonishment, had no doors, with only curtains separating the rooms, perhaps for noise prevention. In contrast, the Greys always looked like they needed a good feed, wash and trim. Having had 8 kids seemed to have drained the colour from Mrs. Grey and her children. Blue, watery eyes and mousy brown hair tied the siblings together. They seemed sucked out of any life in those around them and from each other. Their ramshackle house badly needed paint and tender loving care. It got a makeover once the kids left home. Their eldest daughter managed to pass the HSC, something most large families, of girls especially, didn't even consider possible. My sister's best friend Karina, at 14, had a stepbrother, who I quite didn't get, who at 18 was at uni, studying, and had his own room, which we peeked at from his doorway. "Don't touch anything, he'll know," Karina always whispered. I knew only one person with a double degree, who was way old, 24, and living at home. Most of my Year 10 cohort got jobs or went to St Pat's Business College, unless they were in the A class. There was no negotiating with Dad. Year 12 was compulsory, and it was assumed so was uni. To have 3 daughters at university made other people breathe in noisily when they heard about it. The most memorable family lived diagonally opposite us and were evicted by the Housing Commission. They were put out onto the curb with all their worldly goods in tumbling piles. I peeked through our Venetian blinds at Mrs. McCann and her 4 kids sitting on 4 boxes, surrounded by bags and kitchenware. Mr. McCann was possibly the first person of whom we heard to be banned from Revesby Workers' Club for gambling over his limit. They had just put in poker machines. I was both shocked and curious at their family's unspeakable misfortune. I think our church organised a food hamper. Then afterwards, the family silently disappeared from our lives. The other person who mysteriously and sadly disappeared was a family's child who lived around the corner. They had one son who was extremely smart and was at uni, completing his second degree. This confused me, as we knew no one to go to uni, and certainly no one who willingly did 2 degrees. Their other much younger son was, I assume now, intellectually disabled. I never knew where he went before he was 8. He was never at school. Mum said he pulled up handfuls of carpet. When he was 8, and not before, he gained a place, I assume, at a residential facility. He was never mentioned again as far as I know. It was never spoken of or discussed, but I knew it was very unusual and sad. Our suburban school life was very predictable. If we forgot something at home, we'd be allowed to walk home at lunchtime, retrieve it, and return to school. It was usually my hated Friday sewing kit that I forgot. No ringing Mum on the phone, as we assumed she was A, home, B, unfussed by this liberty, and C, the neighbour who was home had a key if she was out. The end.